Hello and welcome to GuyLogicGaming. My name is Temko and this is Agents of Mayhem, a third-person open-world mayhem simulator. It's a bit of a mix between Saints Row as well as Grand Theft Auto, and with good reason. This is the game developed by the same people that gave us Saints Row 4, where they sort of tried to find a mix between Saints Row 4's over-the-top insanity and Saints Row 3's grounded insanity. But before we dive into anything and everything regarding the game, there are a couple of things to note. Before we dive into gameplay proper, we are going to take a look at PC settings and options, because there are a couple of issues with the PC performance. So let's go ahead and dive in and start talking about controls and gameplay. The usual mouse sensitivity, gamepad sensitivity, and as well as outer range angling and stuff like that is here. You can snap to target and you can even add alien effects, though that really doesn't tell me anything. Sadly, there is no tooltips in the options menu to explain some of these options or settings, so that is a bit of a shame. But the available options are generally pretty complete. Key bindings as well, full rebindable keys with alternate key bindings if you want them. Pretty straightforward. There are no rebindable controller keys, but that is generally par for the course. Then we have audio, which has master as well as 3 sliders for voice, SFX, and music volume. I do suggest playing around with this a little bit because the audio in the game is a little bit wonky. I'll get into that in a little bit as we dive into gameplay. Suffice to say for now that it cuts off at the weirdest of times and it doesn't really overlap that well. Audio mixing goes from various different options you have to allow for the game to set its audio levels to the way it wants. Pretty decent. And then you have display options that have borderless windowed as well as full screen modes. You can even select your display if you have multiple monitors. Never a bad thing to see. The addition of a Vram usage meter here on the right side is always welcome. Gives you a little bit of an indication on how to tweak and tune the game if you are running it a little bit more limited. Obviously, I'm running this on 1080 Ti, so I'm not going to have any worries regarding VRAM usage. But if you're running a little bit of an older card, this display here is going to help you decide which options you really want. Frame rate capping is available, and then you have the advanced options as well. I am a fan of the addition of the colorblind mode. It's pretty straightforward and it displays what it is going to look like. I'm not sure this works for all people with colorblind, and it only really works for parts of the game and not everything. So there may be some overlap here where you still can't see everything perfectly. Obviously, I don't have color blindness myself, so I can't conclusively prove this way one or another, but suffice to say, it has a variant of it in the game, which is very welcome. I have disabled screen shaking because it is annoying, and I have enabled subtitles because, as the aforementioned audio, it's a little bit wonky, so subtitles do help. Fan settings are pretty much what you'd expect, top to bottom. The addition of HBAO is nice. The addition of FXAA and TXAA both being allowed to be enabled at the same time is very nice. Sun shadows having NVIDIA HFTS is also very nice for those people running NVIDIA graphics cards. And then you have a variety of different types of guard rays and stuff like that. Overall, a pretty decent graphical menu in general. The game doesn't have a FOV slider, but it's a third-person over-the-shoulder game with not that tight on angle at all, so that is not an issue in this case. Pretty much par for the course. It's a solid AAA graphics menu. The game even supports Tobii eye tracking, which is also very cool. The addition of this is something we see in more and more games, and from a gameplay and hardcore gamer perspective, I enjoy Tobii eye tracking as a feature. It creates some new ways of controlling games, but from an accessibility standpoint, I applaud it even more. People that may have handicaps or limited movement in their limbs could enjoy this game by using Tobii eye tracking software as well as hardware. No complaints at all, a very nice addition. There's also a bunch of status effects you can have. You can mostly just see these. I'm not sure why this is in the options menu and not just in a separate menu in general, like maybe a tooltip menu or a health menu, but you have the various status effects, and I do like that on the right side they display what these look like with a little bit of a movie intro, and this is something the game does more to its credit. It explains abilities, it explains effects, it explains item attacks, all of these in a sort of tutorial-like window, so that is pretty damn good. There's 2 notes to make in regards to performance, so we're going to do that as we dive into gameplay and talk about everything else. Performance is going to be this game's biggest flaw. The game has a lot of flaws, but it also has a lot of good things going for it. But performance is very much not acceptable in the current patch. This is a couple of days after release, so they've had time to patch out some of the biggest issues, but overall all, the performance is still very iffy. What do I mean by that? Well, overall, there's two main components to performance. It's obviously holding a stable frame rate, and then there is all the things the game does to make sure it holds that frame rate. Things like pop-in are pretty bad in the game as it stands, and there's a couple of other things that happen on screen that really make you wonder what the hell is happening under the hood to keep the game stable, because it's not staying stable either. With my 1080 Ti, not even on maximized graphics, I still can't hold a stable 60 FPS, and while on one end I could understand a wide range of FPS differences between very hectic multi-people battles or very fast car races in crowded areas and a empty tunnel, there is such a huge difference even between different areas of the city doing the same thing. So I could be driving my car on one end of the city, or I could be driving my car on the other end of the city, and there would be a massive difference in FPS. Also, the amount of pop-in that is in the game is utterly atrocious. I have not encountered pop-in this bad since the original Watch Dogs title. Even just running around the city, not even driving your car in a massive speed, already displays a ton of pop-in. Even on the Ark, which is your home base territory thing, even there, jumping from one side to the other of the big cavernous room results in pop-in behind the glasses and behind characters in various different nooks and alcoves, or even geometry objects and details coming in on screen. It is not nice to look at, and really, for a game that is a AAA release for a full price title, and for a game that has this very smooth and nearly cartoony look, there is no real reason why it can't have a stable 60 FPS at any given time. Now granted, there is a lot of spell effects on screen most of the time, and at any given moment you could have between 1 and 50 enemies jumping around, chasing behind you, throwing things at you, bombs going off, geometry exploding, all of this very cool, very enjoyable, reminiscent of Saints Row stuff. But at the same time, your FPS could be fluctuating between 50 and over 200, and that is on a 1080 Ti. I can't fathom somebody running this with a 1060 on any stable frame rate on high settings. You'll probably have to turn this game down to medium to low, and that is just not acceptable. So from a performance standpoint, the game really doesn't do that well, neither in the way it handles its performance in terms of game rendering and in terms of dealing with lots of objects on screen, because keep in mind, while this is open world and open city, there isn't a lot of things going on in most of the areas. Sure, some of the main thoroughfares are going to have a bunch of cars moving around and there's a bunch of NPCs standing around doing whatever NPCs do, but large parts of the game, including on top of buildings, or as you're jumping between cavernous areas or construction sites or something similar, where you're going to have combat but there aren't any civilians, the game FPS still fluctuates immensely. I haven't been able to pinpoint any specific setting that results in this issue, but it's there, so keep that in mind if you're considering buying this title. Having said all of that regarding performance, the game isn't all bad. Now, this isn't to say I excuse the bad performance and probably bad optimization that the game has, but even on slightly lower settings, the game still looks fantastic. The visual art style of this game is truly a joy to behold in almost all regards. While the game has lots of spell effects on screen and there is a lot of things going on at any given time between combat encounters, surrounding geography around you, explosions, your own abilities and effects on yourself and other characters, at any given time you could have half a dozen to 2 dozen spell effects pop up on screen, and the game does a fantastic job in making sure you still know what the hell is going on. You're not gonna see what's going on per se. If there's 2 or 3 explosions blocking your view to an opponent, you're gonna be blocked by that explosion. But even in those cases, you never feel like the game abandons you and tells you to go good luck, figure it out. The reticule you're aiming at is still gonna change color and show you're targeting something. You're still gonna be able to jump up and dash to the side, even if you can't see what is happening. And explosions, once they pass, aren't gonna cause any residual damage in the air unless they're actively set to AoE damage or damage over time puddles. And those are again clearly notable over those that might just be regular explosions on top. This layering of different effects and transparency so you can see what's happening and see the effects that are important, such as an enemy that is stunned versus an enemy that is just shooting at you, is to the game's immense credit. The same applies for when you're driving around, racing your car around corners, speeding around. When you come across an opportunistic target, and there's a couple of these, there's some trucks you can drive off the road to get schematics to unlock new weapons and new cars and new vehicles, and there's a couple of things you can go around and kill targets or save a hostage or some other side quests overall. These do come into screen very clearly, even if you're in the middle of a quest. If you want to take a detour in the middle of a quest to do something else, you can do so, provided it doesn't have a timer. And there are a couple of quests with timers. But overall, the clarity of the graphics is truly fantastic. And the game itself does look nice. The character animations and all the character style and art is what we've come to know and understand from these guys. This is Saints Row's type of art style. It's over the top, it's flamboyant, it's very in your face, but it's also very recognizable. None of the characters do anything redundantly stupid, and everything they do is clearly for a purpose. If there is an attack, they'll stagger. If they're getting hit in the face, they'll fall back. If they're stunned, you'll see a stun animation. There isn't any superfluous stuff going on that removes away from the functional visuals of your characters or opponents. But that said, they all have their little idiosyncrasies. Character run animations are different between each of the various characters you can unlock. So are attack animations and jump animations. Each character has a double or triple jump ability, but depending on the character you have, one could cling to walls and just climb on top. Another might use a rocket boost. Third might use his freeze gun to just sort of jump on the pushback of that freeze gun. And while functionally they all serve the same purpose, getting you on top of a building by multi-jumping, visually and in terms of effectiveness and how they do it, and how that translates to the game, such as a heavy push or a very light little tibbly jump, is fantastic. Now, these graphics also translate into the pseudo cutscenes you get during quest missions, and these cutscenes aren't that great. They're written in this sort of pseudo comic book style with these 2D flat shaded animations, and while in concept I really like that, and in the previews and demos we saw of this game, it was really enjoyable to look at those, the sad reality is that in the game they aren't really well put together. While the actual visuals are nice, the animation quality is very subpar, often being nothing more than static images, something reminiscent of a low budget anime that got pushed and shoved out the door without any consideration of anything else. It doesn't really look that great in production value, which does really clash with the high production value of all the other animations and graphics that are on display in the game. Further, the voices and voice acting is implemented in a little bit of a janky manner. In the 2D cutscene-esque sequences, lip syncing is non-existent and everything just sort of floats around in the general neighborhood of whoever said it and whenever it was said. There is no cohesion between what is said and what is being on display half the time. And while in the overworld and open world map area of the game where you're spending most of your time, the voice acting is generally a lot better in that regard, it is still not great. Now, I'm not talking so much about delivery of the voice acting. The voice actors in question did a tremendously good job. Even though they had some subpar dialogue and subpar scripts to work with in certain areas, overall each of the characters sounds unique and each of them has a distinct personality, one-dimensional though it may be. But when you take a look at the pure technical implementation, there were so many overlaps, cut-offs, shared issues with the audio that it really takes it a couple of steps backwards. Quite a few times I've had in quests and in combat encounters and even just during regular dialogue in the world that the character I'm playing at is silent. There is dialogue. I know there is because after a save file and redoing the same quest, suddenly there is dialogue being shown and there is text that the character says, but on other occasions they're silent. And then you hear the radio on the other end with the operator talking to you or explaining the objective that has a voice. So you're suddenly switching between hearing something, then 5 to 10 seconds of silence as your character replies, but you can't hear it, so you have to follow along with the subtitles that aren't always equally accurate, back to the operator that has a very well-delivered voice. It's just a shamble in terms of technical implementation, and this is something that Agents of Mayhem is riddled with. The same applies for certain other areas. There are several times where they try to use directional audio, making it appear to come from a specific object or specific direction or specific character, but if you turn your head around or your character around or move around the room, suddenly that audio starts clipping and cutting like there's no tomorrow. You might as well just stand still, look straight at a target and hope they don't shoot you in the face if you want to hear the audio in that situation. Not that great. And again, this is purely from a technical implementation standpoint. The quality of the actual voice acting is pretty good, which in many regards makes it an even more egregious situation that the implementation is so fucked in some scenarios. Again, not everywhere, and certainly not the majority of the time, but just often enough to be notable and to be annoying. Moving away from the visuals and audio quality, we do have to talk about gameplay and what the game offers in general, because that is, of course, the most important part of the game. What are you doing playing it? There is 3 main components to this game, like most others, and much like Saints Row 4 or Saints Row 3 or even Grand Theft Auto, you mostly have a city and you want to take it over, and you do so in a variety of ways. You can take control points, you can unlock areas that grant you passive income, you can unlock new zones to get more side objectives, you can do collectibles and unlock various different things such as new cars or new weapons or new skins for your characters. There is a ton of stuff to do, but note that ton of stuff to do doesn't mean it's all fun to do. There is a ton of busy work involved here, and that is sort of inherent to most open world titles, The Witcher 3 being the notable exception here. Half the time in the game you're running around trying to rescue a hostage, or destroy a car, or running around and trying to kill off a lair. And if this was all unique content that had its own idiosyncrasies and its own sets of assets or its own sets of abilities that you could experience and its own unique quirks here and there, that would be fine. Even if the actual engaging content isn't that great, the rest of it would be fun. The problem is that while everything is acceptable, when you are done your 3rd or 4th or even 5th base and you've taken them over, they are identical in all regards. They are identical in how the enemies spawn, they are identical in objectives, how to claim them, and they're identical in basically every manner in how the maps are run. So you never really feel like you're fighting a new boss room. You never feel like you're taking over yet another base from these enemies. You feel like you're doing the same dungeon with the same enemies, killing them yet again, and it doesn't really have that same satisfying feeling, which it definitely has the first couple of times you're doing them, because you're in a base, you don't know what's going on. There's these various side things you can do, there's chests you can find and extra collectibles you can unlock, but by the 4th or 5th time you run into the same map layout, it just sort of rote, and it's just more annoyance than anything else, which is a bit of a shame. And that is, I think, the crux of Agents of Mayhem. A bit of a shame. It's not a bad game in any way. In fact, it's a very enjoyable game in most regards, but every step of the way it leaves you wanting. When you take a look at all the characters and compositions for your teams, each character is just slightly too shallow, just slightly too one-dimensional. They don't have anything extra, no further evolution. And that is fine because you have like 15 characters to unlock, and they have their own missions, and they form parties and teams that have their own missions yet again. Truly enjoyable content, and the various dialogues and interactions in the game also again very enjoyable, but they never really feel like you're connected to them. One of the characters is an archer, and she joined this organization to find out why her people were attacked by this plague or this virus, and that should be a emotionally engaging moment. You should connect to this character who's taken the hard choice of fighting against these enemies so she can save her people. Sadly, that takes all of about 10 seconds of dialogue to get established and then gets ignored from there on in. And sure, she makes some references to it during her filler audio in the map and in the game, but nothing is really done with that any further. And that is damn sad, because expanding on these characters would have made a much more engaging experience while you're playing them. Right now, you just pick whichever character's mechanics fit with your playstyle. I have 3 characters that all have a lot of movement ability, and they all do tons of damage in close combat because that's what I enjoy. But if you want to go with a tank heavy approach or just a longer ranged approach, or you want something completely different, you can mix and match characters to your heart's content. 3 characters to team, you can switch out characters on the fly and switch between them as you're playing as you deem fit. Then you have the combat interactions themselves and the various ways to level up your characters and various champions you have available. And here again, the game takes it 2 steps forward and sort of sticks there before it reaches the finish line. Sure, you can upgrade abilities, you have a couple to choose from for each character, and sure, you can do these special Mayhem abilities that they have and sort of customize what these characters do with additional unlocks, but they are all very minor. In fact, from the very first time I unlocked all the abilities for a character, I set them to whatever I wanted them to be and then never looked back. I didn't really feel a need to change which abilities the characters are using. And though the game has about 15 different difficulty levels you can pick from and change on the fly, most of them really do boil down to more health for your enemies, more than anything else, which creates a second problem in and of itself. There is no further need for deeper tactics or more thinking or consumables or any loadouts or anything else really. You just pick the characters you like and then just hope you can jump around between characters as they passively regenerate health, while the enemy sponges up tons and tons of hits. Now, don't get me wrong, the enemies aren't really that health spongy as it is. They die fairly fast, and overall the different abilities you have between different characters provide a ton of fun, interesting and enjoyable ways to continually kill enemies for a double dozen hours. But especially in the higher difficulties, it doesn't feel like a challenge, but it feels like a chore. And that is a bit of a shame. I personally run this at difficulty level 5, which gives you some XP bonuses, and I found difficulty level 6 and 7 to still be acceptable, if a little bit annoying, but anything after that is just an exercise in patience and endurance, and not really engaging gameplay. So then we shift to what the game has on offer in terms of content. The main story mission overall should take you between 20 and 25 hours, and then you have all the side objectives and side missions and available tasks and unlockables and upgrade paths and everything else in between. That is gonna give you additional 20 to 30 hours of gameplay for sure, and that is not even including all the various things to do in the game world, such as finding collectibles and hidden stuff here and there. Overall, the game is packed full with content. But as I mentioned earlier, most of that content is busy work, and even the main quests and the main missions in the game really do form a rote repetitive pattern pretty fast. So let's extrapolate from there and explain what I mean with that. Most of the missions in the game revolve around you going to an enemy base, killing a bunch of goons, performing 2 or 3 activities such as destroying a couple of energy generators, or running up a staircase and destroying some equipment here and there in a building, and then fighting a boss. Now the bosses are pretty fantastic, but everything up to that point gets repetitive really fast. Not just because the missions repeat it every single time, but because these are the same tasks you're performing in the overall open world areas. Now, it doesn't matter if you're trying to take over an Legion lair, which are the enemy bad guys, and gain control of the map to unlock more side objectives. It doesn't matter if you're doing a main quest or a side quest for one of the characters. All the objectives and all the various different ways you do things are pretty much identical. It's always defend an area from enemies, and while they attack you in a variety of waves, it's always destroy a bunch of crates or a bunch of rockets or a bunch of objects that are just laying there and not being defended by anything. It's always grab these 3 shield generators and destroy them, and one of them is always extra shielded. And then it's always that there's gonna be a captain unit, which is sort of a mini boss that spawns in and you have to kill before being able to go to the next room. And if this was once, it'd be fine. If this was the way they do layers and these bosses for these various different things you can take over in the map, that too, while not really fun, would still be enjoyable, as killing enemies is never gonna get old. It's fun. They blow up in a variety of different ways. You can pop arrows in their heads and then shoot a rocket launcher up their ass. There is nothing bad about that. But when that is everything the game offers in basically every form, whether it's rescuing a hostage, whether it's a main quest mission that goes and progresses a story, or whether it's a side objective that's just a throwaway on the world map, the same activities are basically all you're doing, which leaves you very bored very fast of these activities. And if you're someone like me that enjoys doing a lot of side objectives and unlocking a variety of different things before ever getting into the meat of the story, then not only are you already tired and annoyed of the various mechanics that are being then introduced as story elements, you also know how to counter them because they are the very same ones you've already dealt with. So the challenge in this regard also gets removed. I might say, well, then you can raise up the difficulty level, but sadly, as I mentioned earlier, that really doesn't do anything but create massive amounts of annoyance. Now, the second big part you're going to be doing in this game is a ton of combat. And this is probably the one thing I really enjoy in this game. But even here, it takes 2 steps forward and just sort of leaves you hanging before taking that mythical 3rd step. While combat is very enjoyable and each character you're playing has their own take on how they're going to engage, whether it's an ammo-based soldier, whether it's a ammo-less ability that just has a ton of cooldown units, whether it's an overheat mechanic, whether it's something like Cold Soldier that has a freezing mechanic where when he shoots his gun long enough, it freezes over, but that in turn grants him a melee combat bonus. So he freezes his enemies and then he kills them in a couple of blows. And the same applies for most other enemies. Whether or not you're meleeing, doing it with a bow and arrow from a large distance, machine gunning or shotgunning enemies to the face. Each combat encounter, each character has a pretty unique style that is damn enjoyable. Couple that with their special superpowered Mayhem ability, which also does something unique for every character, they're all very useful in a different variety of scenarios. And depending on the mission and the objectives, you might want to change and switch around teams to make sure you have characters that are available to you at any given time. There is a minor issue here though, and that is the way you level up characters. If you're very late in the game and you have your party team and they're all level 15, 16, 17, 20 plus at that time, and you switch out some characters for different characters, it is very easy to get in an area where one or two of your characters are very high level and your third character is shit weak, which means that they're going to be pretty useless when faced against enemies that have 5 times the hit points than they are designed to deal with. I'm not sure how the developers could fix this outside of having all characters level up simultaneously, but nonetheless it is an issue I encountered where I had an enemy with a shotgun I wasn't using much initially, and when I got bored of another character, I wanted to switch to that character, but sadly I first had to do a bunch of random bullshit stuff on the overworld, which was just tedious and annoying, before he was strong enough to tag along with these other 2 leveled up, powered up characters. Not fantastic. Again, not bad either, just not fantastic. And I'm going to repeat that point because that is what it boils down to for Agents of Mayhem. They tried to take on the very over-the-top feel of Saints Row 4 and sort of tone it down a few notches. But in almost all regards, they did tone it down a few notches, but they didn't make it more interesting. The ridiculousness that was Saints Row 4 made it possible to ignore some of the flaws that game had, some of the overarching simplicities, and some of the cringeworthy dialogue. Because this game tries to tone it down a few notches and bring in that serious note on occasion, it just falls flat on its face in some scenarios, especially when you get that emotional stage in between jokes about Uranus. That isn't a way to create tension, that isn't a way to create unique or interesting dialogue. Sure, I'll take a Uranus joke between my characters smoking cigars and pulling down lasers from the sky, but I'm not gonna then turn around and watch a 2-minute emotional piece about some dialogue that happens. That's not the way it's gonna work. I'm not gonna feel engaged to that in any way. So I would have preferred if Agents of Mayhem would have just gone the quirky, hilarious, funny route, or would have tried to go the serious but enjoyable route. I would have even liked a mix, but just having it be very funny, quirky, and over-the-top humor 90% of the time isn't conducive to then having 10% serious emotional engagement. That's not gonna work that way, and it doesn't, because it does fall flat on its face in my eyes. So to bring it all together once again, Agents of Mayhem is not a bad game. In fact, it's a very enjoyable open world title, but it could be a lot better, and it's a shame that it's not, because there are 2 more main points to make regarding Agents of Mayhem that pull it down a few notches from just great, enjoyable, brainless fun and engagement to just somewhat enjoyable, tinged with just some bad decisions everywhere. That alone would prevent me personally from purchasing this game at full price, and I would just wait on a Game of the Year edition. But there are other considerations to take in place for Agents of Mayhem, and these considerations are fairly important. Whether or not you want to grab the game right now and dive in for about 20, 30 to 40 hours of enjoyable city destruction mayhem, or even to hold off and get the Game of the Year edition down the line in about a year. Those are as follows. From a performance standpoint, the game is a little bit wonky. You do need to keep that in mind in most situations and scenarios, and I would suggest waiting on purchasing this title at least a couple of weeks until they iron out the most egregious of these issues. Things like the arc, where you have your main hub not having a stable 60 on a 1080 Ti, are just never acceptable in any scenario. And if you're running on a more reasonable graphic card, such as a 1060 or a 1070, the game is just not gonna run smooth and stable, and that is not okay. Then if you go into the story and the gameplay depth and complexity, this is fine. The gameplay depth and complexity is enjoyable. You run around, destroy enemies in your path, blow them up with grenades, rocket launchers, machine guns, and bow and arrow if you want. Combine your team of 3 and go out, have a romp. Blow up cars, blow up half a building, take over stations, and do so with a rolling ball of doom where you can roll it down at an enemy and crush them in front of you, quite literally. Very good. There's even foot races, and there is racing cars, and you can unlock new cars and new models and skins for these cars. There is a lot of stuff to do. From that perspective, the game is a great value proposition. You have a ton of stuff to do, as do most open world titles. But from the perspective of quality over quantity, or as I like to call it, killer over filler, the game does leave a little bit to be desired. If we take an example such as Witcher 3, where there is a lot of quality content that is always enjoyable and never feels repetitive in any scenario, and you have a game like Mad Max that has a lot of content but most of it is repetitive, Agents of Mayhem falls squarely in the middle. While some of the mechanics and most of the art assets are pretty repetitive, even going into the main story, the vast majority of the storylines and content in question, due to the very good voice acting, even if the technical implementation is weak, are very good. No complaints there overall. But a nitpick here, of course, is the fact that while these mechanics are pretty good, having them be available to you from the get-go and having them forced on you repeatedly and repeatedly throughout all the missions does get tedious and annoying quite fast. The variety of customization is also a little bit of a mixed bag. Games like this thrive, especially games like Saints Row, thrive on the ability to customize everything and anything in the game to your heart's content. Make it your own, and that is part of the charm of these kinds of titles. But Agents of Mayhem's customization is mostly in the technical side, which abilities your characters can use, how you power up these abilities, which characters you want in your party out of those available, but the visual customization and even the customization of your cars and abilities and everything else is fairly limited. Sure, you can pick which car type you want, but then there's only about a dozen car types and about half a dozen skins you can get reasonably well. And there is DLC available for extra skins, but fair and frank, that one isn't really worth it. The quality of these skins isn't that much better than those available in the game as it stands, and for the additional cost of that DLC, you might as well hold off until they introduce a DLC pack that just has more interesting content. Now, I could go on in all the various different ways Agents of Mayhem has a bunch of content. There is a global conflict map where you can set out agents for real-time mode, much like Dragon Age Inquisition had. There is ways you can create content and do a variety of things in the game. All of that is in the game, so if you enjoy that sort of gathering and collecting and hunting, then yeah, the game has you covered, as would any open-world sandbox game. But from the perspective of someone that enjoys the main story and some side objectives on the side, Agents of Mayhem from a gameplay perspective does fulfill that quite nicely. But from the perspective of technical implementation, especially on the graphical quality and stability and audio stability side, the game does leave you hanging. So would I recommend Agents of Mayhem? And the answer to that is maybe, and that fully depends on how much you enjoy doing repetitive content. If you really want every content piece, every quest, every action, every interaction to be unique and different, if that is important to you, then Agents of Mayhem is not going to be the game for you at full price. I would still recommend checking it out at a later date, maybe at a sale or at a Game of the Year edition, but if you can deal with some repetitive content, some open world kill a bunch of enemies until they stop coming at you kind of content, some destroy a bunch of buildings and a bunch of rocks and crash cars into railings type of content, then yeah, Agents of Mayhem does do a tremendously good job in that regard. And with 15 difficulty levels, you can fine-tune this to your heart's content. That said, even then, I would still hold off a couple of weeks at minimum to see what happens with the performance and how they plan on patching that. Agents of Mayhem is available over on Steam for $60 or your regional equivalent, and there's a link in the description below if you are so inclined to check it out. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, press that like button down below. If you didn't like this video, there's a dislike button for exactly that purpose, and leave a comment. Tell us what you think about this Saints Row's evolution of games down in the comments below. And if you want to see more content like this on the channel, just press that subscribe button and we will deliver. So until then, I wish you a good day, and until next time, right here on GuyLogicGaming.